political. This one not the off in mind.
Recruit 50 million youths into the army and take away from their recruitment source. What they will eat? Cassava, àgbàdo, corn, in the morning, yam in the afternoon. It's growing here. You create demand and consumption.
On October 11, 1990, federal agents from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration knocked on the front door of 460 Taft Place in the city of Gary, Indiana. Once a booming steel town with a population approaching 180,000 in 1960, Gary was one of a number of cities and towns across the U.S. suffering from severe population loss, among other adverse effects of overseas competition on their mainstay industries. From having over 30,000 employees at its peak in 1970, the city's main employer, U.S. Steel Gary Works, retained just 6,000 employees in 1990. Under these circumstances, this city and its 77% African-American population were witnessing explosive growth in one of the only industries guaranteed to boom under such difficult circumstances. 42-year-old Lee Andrew Edwards was one of the entrepreneurs who had found a place in the heroin trafficking business, and by all accounts, he had done very well for himself. With the proceeds from his illegal business, he had bought 2 residential homes, including 460 Taft Place, an apartment building, a liquor store, and a new car, all paid for with cash. Now, according to court records from the United States Court of Appeals 7th Circuit, the DEA agents arrived at the property to execute a search warrant after a 7-month FBI investigation involving Edwards' brother, Jimmy, had implicated him as the narcotics kingpin of Gary. Edwards did not open the door for the agents, who were forced to break into the house. He then fired 3 gunshots at them, after which he surrendered. DEA agents found weapons including a carbine rifle, thousands of dollars in cash, drug prepping equipment including a triple beam scale, and several grams of cocaine and heroin powder in the house. He was later sentenced to life in prison, but not before something about his business operation came to the fore. Federal investigators had determined that Edwards' heroin supply came from a Nigerian drug dealer in Chicago called Abiodun Agbele. Abiodun had earlier agreed to work for the feds in exchange for lighter sentencing, and as part of the plea deal, he revealed everything he knew about the heroin trade in Chicago. Located at the junction of 4 states with a combined population exceeding 27 million at the time, Chicago was a key trafficking hub in the American heroin trade, and as it turned out, the wholesale trade of an especially potent form of heroin from Southeast Asia in 1990 Chicago was controlled by Nigerian criminal gangs. The following excerpt is taken from the January 2001 Illinois Drug Threat Assessment published by the U.S. Justice Department's National Drug Intelligence Center. Nigerian criminal groups are responsible for wholesale distribution of most of the SEA heroin shipped into Chicago. SEA heroin, which is 80 to 90% pure, is being sold by Nigerian traffickers for $80,000 to $110,000 per kilogram. Wholesalers in Chicago usually sell heroin without cutting it to minimize the handling of the product and their exposure to law enforcement. Now, Agbele himself was no criminal mastermind, however. As he testified under oath, that honor belonged to a man who went by the name of Adegboyega Muiz Akonde, who was apparently his uncle. Shortly after Agbele's arrival in the US, Akonde had taken him under his wing and showed him the ropes of wholesale heroin trafficking. When Akonde returned to Nigeria in mid-1990, Agbele was left in charge of selling regular heroin shipments from Nigeria to Lee Edwards and delivering the profits to his uncle. In the meantime, the Nigerian-led heroin trade in Chicago fed an addiction epidemic that became so bad that it changed local health and law enforcement practices. For the first time, providing addicts with free access to safe syringes and needles to ensure that they did not share them and possibly spread HIV became a core focus of public health policy. In other words, SEA heroin from Nigeria was so potent and addictive that public health policy in Chicago shifted away from trying to make heroin addicts stop using altogether to merely ensuring that they used safely. A notable organization that did such outreach work with heroin addicts was the Chicago Recovery Alliance. While researching this story, I reached out to its current executive director, John Werning, to get a sense of how the heroin epidemic changed law enforcement practices from 1990s to date in Chicago. And his comments were very predictably grim. He said, heroin, of course, has consequences, but I think we'll probably say that the more major impact is the draconian laws around how heroin was policed. I think that it's pretty well established that there was a very specific targeting of folks who use drugs generally, but also heroin in particular, and it was mostly targeted toward the policing of Black and brown communities. That's not specific to Chicago. I think that's across the nation. But just in general, I think there was a lack of compassion by government entities to give people access to the treatment that they need, or nonviolent drug possession and mandatory minimum sentencing. I mean, there's a ton of different aspects of this that absolutely eviscerated populations, particularly marginalized populations in Chicago. And that's probably the advocate's view on this. Now, whether or not that can be translated into a comment about the international drug trade and specifically from, you said, Nigeria, I just don't know. But that's definitely more like domestic politics.
Sorry about that, everybody. I'm so sorry. I just got carried away there. I forgot that the audio is the microphone is muted. Very, very sorry. I'll retake what I said, just for the sake of those who have who probably didn't hear me. For all of you who didn't hear what I said, okay. Well, first thing first. Good morning to you. Good afternoon to you, and good evening to you from wherever you are. You are you are watching from. I understand. Don't worry. I remember everything I said. I'll repeat them. So what I was saying then was that I've been away for 2 days. 2 days. Because Ojojo was doing Ogun and Ogun's body no strong. Therefore, Ogun finally had to use ibuprofen, cocodamol, paracetamol, and a lot of rest. Somehow, I am back. But while I was away, I was reading, these days, right? Everything is on the internet, okay? Everything is there. And I was just trying to figure out, like, okay, these Nigerians, these hypocrites, they tend to always throw God into every conversation. Every small thing, God. God, all that stuff. Then they fight for God and leave their own fight for God. That's God should fight for them. But in the process, right, they dissipate so much energy. Nigerians, they dissipate so much energy defending criminals, drug dealers, drug lords, money launderers, killers, murderers, kidnappers, manipulators, certificate forgers, name it. These religious, righteous Nigerians, they defend these criminals. So when I was away, right, I was trying to figure out, like, okay, maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe I'm actually the one who is not following, okay? Maybe religiously, these hypocrite Nigerians, maybe there is actually a religious doctrine that compel them, right or wrong, to defend their roguish leaders. I can't realize, say, for Quran, in Islam, it is haram to defend drug dealers. It is haram to even deal in drugs. Do you understand? Which means anything that is associated with drug money, anything. As a true Muslim, you should never be found, right, associating with them, talk less of defending them. But now Olori Bruku plenty among many of you Nigerians. Olori Bruku, Tonko Shiba, Olori Re. And that is why I look at the country. So I realize that una no be religious, una be fake. Defending drug dealers. So I found out in 2 days. I also read there was nowhere there in the Bible anyway that you should defend criminals. It is called haram. Now, I would continue to play this, okay? Because this is from a one-known drug dealer, accountant to the drug dealers, who is also going to be your presidiot. I'll come back to that.
All this is going on, and see subplot taking place in the background. An accountant living in the Chicago area who worked for Mobile Oil Nigeria with a declared monthly income of $2,400 had just deposited over $1.4 million in the bank. He had no known source of income apart from his day job, but he had become friends with Akonde and Agbede, discovering one key piece of information in the process: drug dealers need accountants too. Soon, he will find himself holding and wiring money on behalf of a Nigerian heroin gang in Chicago. Fast forward a little bit to January 1992, and he will find himself the subject of a US federal investigation. Fast forward a bit further in the same year, and he would successfully run for office in Nigeria as a senator for Lagos West. Then another politician, also said to have ties to international drug trafficking, would successfully run for president in Nigeria on a controversial all-Muslim ticket in 1993. The election will be annulled, the politician will be jailed, and ultimately another Nigerian military coup will take place in 1994. This accountant will find himself exiled and working with the National Democratic Coalition, Docu, to unseat a kleptocrat military dictator. Then the dictator would unexpectedly drop dead one day in 1998, followed in quick succession by the jailed politician with the alleged drug links. This accountant would return to Nigeria a hero and successfully run for governor of Lagos in 1999. The kleptocrat dictator's erstwhile bagman, who helped launder over $4 billion, would become the accountant's new best friend. As an erstwhile Chicago drug gang's loader, would start his new lifetime mission of capturing Africa's largest subnational economy and turning it into his personal fiefdom. A major political opponent of the accountant would end up strangled to death in his bedroom 10 months to an election which his chosen candidate would go on to win. Said opponent's son would subsequently be offered a cushy job working for that candidate. He would accept the offer. And if you're already struggling to follow this unlikely sequence of events, don't worry, it gets worse. A US district court would seem like an odd place to begin this story, but this is no ordinary story. The main character in this story is an individual whose entire existence is as puzzlingly mysterious as it is loud and public. For at least 30 years, Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been at or near the grinding phase of frontline politics in Nigeria. Yet the peak 1 inch below the surface reveals just how little is actually known about this man, who some say is Nigeria's president in waiting. First of all, there is the age controversy. How old is the man really? What is his real date of birth? Short answer, no one actually knows. Like many Nigerians born into the less than auspicious circumstances that characterized his childhood in Iragbiji in Osun State, southwestern Nigeria, he doesn't know. Similar controversy exists around what his actual name is. A popular theory is that Bola Ahmed Tinubu is an identity that he transitioned into at some point after moving to Lagos to live with his surrogate mother, Alhaja Abiyachu Mogaji. The only thing every version of his life story has in common is that for the first 2 decades or so, he was apparently invisible and unmemorable. There are no childhood friends, there are no classmates, there are no neighbors, there are no colleagues that remember him. Sometime in the mid-1970s, however, he somehow materialized at the international airport in Lagos, holding a passport with a US visa and a one-way ticket to Chicago in hand. From his arrival in Chicago in 1975, his story then becomes easier to track and verify. So what do we know about this guy? We know that he spent 2 years gaining an associate degree at Richard J. Daley College in Chicago. From there, he proceeded on to Chicago State University, where he studied accounting, completing his bachelor's degree in 1979. Subsequently, his story appeared straightforward and prosaic. He got a job as an accountant at Mobil Oil Nigeria Limited in Fairfax, Virginia, got married to Oluremi, went on to have 3 kids with her, after 3 fruitful indiscretions, shall we say. In a 2016 interview with the News, Tinubu claimed that his break into the financial big time came at the Big Four consultancy firm Deloitte, where he supposedly received an $850,000 bonus as a result of his work on a single on-site engagement at the Saudi state-owned oil firm Saudi Aramco. Now, for anyone with even a passing knowledge of corporate consultancy pay, the categorical dishonesty in this claim needs no explanation. For everyone else, here is a current breakdown of the maximum possible amount that a partner, which is the highest attainable position, can realistically expect to earn at Deloitte USA. Bear in mind that the time period in question was sometime in the mid-1980s, so $850,000 adjusted for the roughly 2.74% annual inflation rate over the intervening 37 years comes to about $2.3 million in today's money. And even more incredibly, Tinubu claimed that he was awarded such a bonus and he was essentially less than 5 years into his career as an accountant, never mind making partner. Now, while the interview in question contains several other giant fibs, this particular one stands out because it is the first time in the Tinubu story where he himself acknowledges and tries to explain the fact that he once had a lot more money than a simple accountant working a 9-to-5 consultancy job could reasonably account for at that point in his career. And you should keep that in mind because this becomes more important later on in the story. Now, in any case, one doesn't need an economic study or a Glassdoor salary survey to establish that Tinubu was blatantly lying about where the supposed $1.8 million sitting in his account came from. A document whose existence has long been teased and rumored but never quite properly dissected in public domain tells us all that we need to know. This document, which was obtained from the U.S. District Court of the Northern District of Illinois Eastern Division, contains damning information that Tinubu himself has spent past 30 years trying to suppress, undermine, and ignore. This document contains comprehensive case files of a federal case from July 1993, containing clear and incontrovertible evidence that Bola Ahmed Tinubu was once, in fact, a bagman, handling and laundering proceeds of heroin trafficking for a Nigerian drug ring in Chicago. Now, this is not the first time that the contents of this document have been reported, but other stories that have tried to report this story have typically not gone into the detail needed to drive home the point that the man who would be Nigeria's next president is, in fact, a drug criminal. Tinubu's vast army of the media shills and spokespeople have spun an endless web of narratives explaining why what is written in black and white is all some kind of mistake or mischaracterization or fake news. And one of the most common defenses is what you can see on your screen right now. Taking advantage of a Nigerian knowledge gap that typically misunderstands how US federal investigations work, this kind of narrative has been floating around the Nigerian media space ever since Tinubu became Lagos State Governor in 1999. Now, explaining the efficiency of indictments in the US, H. Michael Steinberg, founder of the Steinberg Colorado criminal defense law firm, says, "What are the chances for a not guilty verdict if a federally charged criminal defendant takes the case to trial? Statistically, not very good. Currently, federal prosecutors tout above a 95% conviction rate. This is primarily due to the fact that most cases never make it to trial. Most defendants end up taking a plea bargain rather than risk a potentially much greater prison sentence which could be dealt them if they actually went to trial and lost." Now, what this means, in other words, is that America's feds are very good at their jobs, and the likelihood of a defendant in a federal case not being convicted is roughly 5%. Basically, not very good chances. So, could Tinubu perhaps have been part of that 5%? And if not, then what happened exactly that prevented a conviction? Among the dozens of documents in the case files, there's a sworn statement by IRS Special Agent Kevin Moss, who personally investigated Bola Tinubu's financial activities in the lead-up to Lee Edwards' arrest. Here, we reunite with our old friends Abiodun Agbele and Adegboyega Moise Akonde as we pick our way through our heroes' forbidden past. Now, in the interest of keeping this brief, here's a Cliff Notes version. The U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, Michael Shepard, files a complaint for forfeiture of funds in bank accounts held by Tinubu as they hold proceeds of a heroin distribution organization headed by Adegboyega Moise Akonde. Tinubu's funds represent, and I quote, the proceeds of this operation or property involved in money laundering and the proceeds of narcotics trafficking. Shepard requests that the court adjudge and decree that the funds should be forfeited to the United States. Special Agent Moss has analyzed financial documents including bank statements, money orders, cashier's checks, tax returns, and, I quote, wire transfers of huge amounts of cash generated by individuals who are believed to be members of this heroin distribution organization. And he reaches a professional conclusion that the accounts controlled by Tinubu, and I quote, were involved in financial transactions representing proceeds of drug trafficking. The investigation, which began in 1988, has identified Adegboyega Moise Akonde and his nephew Abiodun Agbele as key figures in the trade and distribution of heroin. The investigation identifies the third individual working with the duo to launder their money as a certain Bola Tinubu. In December 1989, Akonde takes Tinubu to a First Heritage Bank to open an individual money account. On the application, Tinubu gives his address as 7504 South Stewart Avenue, Chicago, which is the same address that Akonde uses as his heroin trap house. Special Agent Moss discovers that Mrs. Oluremi Tinubu has previously opened a joint account at the same bank with Audrey Akonde, wife of Adegboyega Moise Akonde. On January 4, 1990, just 5 days after opening the account, Tinubu deposits $80,000 into it. On a subsequent credit application dated January 6, 1990, Tinubu states that he is an employee of Mobil Oil Nigeria Limited with a total monthly salary of $2,400 and no other sources of income. He gives his address as 7504 South Stewart and lists Akonde as his cousin. Despite earning just $2,400 a month with no other known source of income, bank records from First Heritage Bank show that over the course of 1990 alone, Bola Tinubu goes on to deposit $661,000 into his individual money market account, followed by a further $1,216,500 in 1991. And if you're paying attention, that is roughly equal to the $1.8 million he would later claim he made from Deloitte bonuses and salary deposits. Now, when Special Agent Moss interviews Mobil Oil reps about Tinubu's employment, they confirm that Tinubu works at Mobil Oil Nigeria as a treasurer in a capacity that does not involve transfer or custody of large amounts of money. Moss also discovers that Tinubu has failed to file U.S. income tax returns since 1984. On January 10, 1992, a court order is obtained to freeze some of Tinubu's bank accounts containing the suspected proceeds of heroin trafficking in excess of $1.4 million. On January 13, 1992, during a telephone conversation from Nigeria with Special Agent Moss, Tinubu admits to the agent that he knows Akonde and that he had previously wire transferred $100,000 to Akonde's account in Houston. Further, Tinubu says that the $80,000 he deposited into the First Heritage Bank came from Akonde. Tinubu also reveals that he had additional bank accounts in Fairfax, Virginia and London, UK. Speaking over the telephone with Special Agent Moss on January 14, 1992, Tinubu admits that he knows Agbele and that he met him through Akonde. Tinubu admits that he has associated with Agbele and Akonde in the US and in Nigeria. In this conversation, Tinubu denies having any additional bank accounts in the US. On January 24, 1992, following a seizure warrant to freeze over $500,000 of unexplained funds in Tinubu's Citibank account, Citibank discovers two additional bank accounts controlled by Tinubu under the name of Compass Finance and Investment Company Limited. Citibank's account opening KYC records bring up a memorandum of association and articles of organization identifying and Agbele as directors of Compass Finance and Investment Company Limited. Between January 30 and January 31, 1992, Tinubu suddenly does an about-face and tells US agents that he has never had any business association or financial relationship with Agbele or Akonde. This statement directly contradicts his earlier statements and the documentation from Citibank and First Heritage Bank. Special Agent Moss concludes in his submission that based upon this evidence, there is probable cause to believe that a number of Tinubu's accounts are involved in narcotics transactions. The court agrees and orders the forfeiture on August 18, 1993. Tinubu opts to fight the case, claiming that the money is legitimate and it belongs to one Kafaru Tinubu and his surrogate mother Alaja Habibat Mogaji. Ultimately, he enters into a settlement with the US government on September 15, 1993, agreeing to forfeit $460,000 of the heroin trafficking proceeds to the US government. The balance of roughly $1 million is released to him. Now, why did the US authorities adopt this approach instead of going the whole hog and insisting on litigation so as to obtain the full amount? The US Justice Department's guidelines for asset settlements to cases provides the answer to this in plain English. Settlements to forfeit property are encouraged to conserve the resources of both the United States and claimants in situations where justice will be served. In any case, the ascent of General Abacha and his rabid anti-American posturing very quickly led to a shift in US government priorities. Anyone who was on board with Decu and promoting democracy in the face of Abacha's fascism suddenly became an ally, even if just a few years before they had contributed to a heroin epidemic on the streets of Chicago. As anyone with some knowledge of the CIA-Contra crack cocaine affair would know, even Uncle Sam can turn a blind eye to drug dealers when they are working in his interests. Also remember, it was the 1990s. The 90s were a crazy time. At the time when Tinubu informed the US authorities that he was a lowly treasurer at Mobile, Nigeria on $2,400 a month, after having apparently been the world's most generously rewarded junior Deloitte accountant, he was doing some decidedly non-lowly things in the background. Now, while working on this story, a bit of research across US land registries threw up a few perlers like this one from the Land Records Department at Prince George's County in Maryland. Now, on January 20, 1992, barely 10 days after IRS Special Agent Moss made first contact with Tinubu via telephone, Tinubu purchased a 4-bedroom, 3,016 square foot home at 10111 Limestone Court, Potomac, Maryland, for the miserly sum of $450,000, which he paid in full and upfront, by the way, no mortgage. Now, for reference, this is what this property looks like. This was about 10 days before he did his about-face to Agent Moss, denying having had any financial relationship with his heroin trafficking buddies, Agbele and Akonde. Now, the obvious question raised here is one about timing. Was Tinubu attempting to hide money from US authorities by parking it in real estate once he realized that they were onto him? Where did the funds to carry out this transaction even come from at a time when his accounts were being frozen right, left, and center? Now, more real estate record searches raise even more questions about several other parts of the known Tinubu story, including his self-characterization as a bedraggled hero of the democratic struggle and the Nadeco movement under General Sani Abacha. Now, in the interview mentioned earlier, he claimed that following Abacha's coup and his eventual exit from Nigeria, that he was forced to live almost like a pauper after the Nigerian government stripped him of all that he had. Describing his weary but triumphant return home from exile, he said, "I came home with 3 pairs of trousers and 3 jackets. Meanwhile, I had no Victoria Island home to return to. It had been taken over by Abacha. They dispossessed me of the house as well as my office on Saka Tinubu Street, my vehicles and everything else I owned. They claimed they found bombs in it and dispossessed me of it. I was totally cleaned out. I had only 5 shirts, the £2,000 and the jackets. And yet, the Prince George's County Land Records Department would beg to differ, because here was our tragic impoverished struggle, casually dropping the minor sum of $147,000 in 1995 for a 3-bedroom, 1,668 square foot home at 12625 Hillmate Station Drive, Prince George's County, Maryland. He would go on to charge a tidy $13,000 in profit when he sold it on just 3 years later. He was at it again in 1997, putting down the modest sum of $491,465 on a 4,558 square foot property at 1708 Parkside Drive, Mitchellville, Maryland. Again, all cash, no mortgage. He would go on to sell this property in December 2018 for $700,000. What is more, these weird transactions did not end in 1999 or stop with our hero and his wife. Even their two youngest children, Habibat Oyindamola Tinubu and Zainab Abisola Tinubu, got in on the act fairly recently. Aged 32 and 30 respectively, two of the three youngest members of Bola Tinubu's family have managed to escape scrutiny, mostly because the Freedom of Information Act in Nigeria is still much more aspiration than fact. Not so in America, where a plethora of services can pull up all kinds of records, including birthdays, criminal convictions, and real estate transactions. Especially real estate transactions. Such as the ones where a 25-year-old with no known employment or source of income was able to pay $2,150,000 in 2014 for a deluxe condo at 55 Berry Street, Brooklyn, New York. Full and upfront cash payment again, no mortgage. Or real estate transactions where the 25-year-old's 22-year-old sister, who was fresh out of music school with no known source of income, was able to pay $2,400,000 in cash to buy a deluxe apartment at 255 Hudson Street, New York, using the 1-inch thick fig leaf that was a company that she herself owned. It appears that Bola Tinubu's good fortune could be genetically transmitted. I mean, what are the odds that the only junior accountant in the world to earn an $850,000 bonus on a single engagement will turn out to have children who can buy luxury real estate in New York for millions of dollars while being unemployed with no known source of income? Not great chances, but here we are. Now, in the course of researching this story, a name that...
Thank you very much. Yeah, David. See, if you want to see the full clip, I know so many of you are enjoying it. I may play it before we go to this morning or this afternoon, okay? But you can go on to David Hundeyin. Go to the Newsweek. Africa, let me see the name again. Africa News. Wait, give me a sec. Now, it's called the West Africa Weekly. Yeah, West Africa Weekly. Go on to YouTube and you will see the premiere there. It is just about 30 minutes, I think. A part of a report that has been in the public for months now. And I've told people, I said, listen, even if Tinubu become your president, you see this tag of heroin dealing, drug smuggling, and everywhere that that is live, they are not going to go away. Even when Tinubu dies, when people are saying things about him, they will always remember he is a what? He is a thief, he is a drug dealer, he is a drug dealer's accountant, heroin dealer's accountant, and whatever you want to say, it's not going to go away. Well, I have something for you. That is why I tagged this broadcast. Like, do you as a Christian or as a Muslim agree that it is right to defend drug dealers, right? Or it is wrong to defend drug dealers? What does your religion say? What does your faith say about things like this? Of course, I don't expect you to be honest, okay? Because the typical thing, I was reading a comment earlier, right? And one weary jumped in, and you know what he said? He said, well, are you saints? That's the question. Are you a saint? Because it is Nigeria, you bunch of hypocrites, bare-faced hypocrites. Drug, they say no to drugs, right? And it also said, somebody approached, let me tell you this, somebody approached a sheikh during one of the sermons, right? Like, and they said, sheikh, we have a question. In fact, we have two questions. The first question is, as lawyers, you know, lawyers' job, the job of a lawyer is to defend their client, guilty or not guilty. You know, a lawyer will have to stand up and defend you, right? So they approached this sheikh and they said, sheikh, lawyers who defend people in court on different cases and all that, they defend murderers, they defend rapists, they defend armed robbers, they defend drug dealers, they defend, you know, all kind of people. But drug dealers in particular, when a lawyer who is a Muslim appears for a drug dealer, right? And somehow push the case, and the drug dealer, like everybody knows that he's a drug dealer, right? Then this lawyer now defended the drug dealer, and the drug dealer won. Say, what does this mean in the presence of Allah? They asked the sheikh. You know what the sheikh said? Just so you know that I did my research. The sheikh said, number one, it is haram to defend those you know, as a Muslim, to defend those you know that they have committed this crime, but somehow they have managed to wriggle out of it. But you know that it is haram for you to defend them. That even if you defend, in the course of defending them, that you are defended because you have no idea that they are guilty as a Muslim, right? That the moment you discover that, he actually did it, that moment you have to withdraw from it completely. Now they said, but what if he's already defended the drug dealer and the drug dealer has won? What will happen? The sheikh said, because the lawyer has used his trick to save a drug dealer from justice, the right thing to do, number one, he should pay back every penny he collected for that job from that drug dealer. Pay back everything. Secondly, he must never get involved in any appeal against the drug dealer, the judgment they got for him. And thirdly, that lawyer must go back to that judge, that court, and confess to the justices that, listen, judge, my client is guilty. He's a drug dealer. I defended him based on the law and all that. But as it is a complete haram for me to even have defended him. Do you get that? I know that there is no religion in Nigeria. Majority of you, they pushy. And that is why you prefer to elect criminals. Empower rogues, criminals that will deal with your lives. Then you turn around and face God. God, come and help us. God, come and save us. And then he probably just look at you and laugh. Like, look at these stupid people. Look at these useless people. You deliberately, intentionally, you are promoting criminals. You are promoting murderers. You are promoting thieves. You are promoting looters that keep doing the same thing again and again. And some of you are doing so in the name of religion. Are you following me? Using your time to defend the Olori Burukus, whose mission and existence in their life, all their lives, was to hurt you, harm you, directly or indirectly. And they continue to do it and get away with it. So, if you then want God to do something, are you with me? If you want God to deal with somebody who is exposing these rogues, are you sure that you are not secretly mad? Because if you are normal, your religion that you're asking God to, your religion makes you think, see, in the next 1 week, my ego, you will see, God will shock you. Oloribu, God shock me, ke. Abi, you are actually like massaging what will shock you to death. Okay, hang on. It is haram. Plain and simple. If you are a Muslim, when you see people who have been involved, where is the evidence? Abi, where really evidence wolotungwa? Even if they buff Tinubu with heroin and cocoa, like they pour heroin on him, soaking, and they pour the powder cocoa on him, you will be asking for evidence, won't you? But in your heart of hearts, if you have to claim your religion, your useless religion that some of you are pushing about, your fake religion, fake God, fake faith, and every fake thing about you, that doesn't really gel. If you want to try and check them, be honest, you will agree this one is wrong. Normal, I shouldn't be seen defending criminals ordinarily, whether they are Yoruba, whether they are Hausa, whether they are Fulani, whether they are Igbo, whether they are Ijo, wherever they come from. any part of Nigeria, once I know what this guy stands for, which you know, you do. The problem is you prefer your thieves differently. That's the problem. You love your thieves, your criminals differently. I just want you to know that every time you call on God on behalf of these rogues, you are an hypocrite. I'm saying it to you, to your face, and I hope it meets you well. So what happened is this. David, help me round this up before myself round them up.
Kept coming up repeatedly as a comparison to Teflon Ashiwaju was a certain Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, MQ Abiola. Now, when the Daily Beast took a stab at this story a few years ago, it's tantalizing him as an unimaginable parallel between 1993 and 2023. I reached out to everyone I could think of with some knowledge of the affair. Most declined to speak, citing some unspoken concerns. Only Professor Gary K. Bush, a notable African political risk analyst and one-time professor of African studies at the University of Hawaii, agreed to say his piece. His lengthy comments went as follows. The Nigerian military on the council were adamant that the Babangida government should not allow Abiola to run for office, and told President Babangida so during the aborted runoff primaries before the election. The basis for their concern about Abiola was the information and documentation being circulated in Washington, London, and Lagos of Abiola's alleged ties to the drugs business. The US in particular had expressed its strong opposition to IBB about the candidacy of Abiola as president, not because of his politics or allegations of corruption, but rather for the evidence they felt was correct about Abiola's alleged drugs connections. This issue was raised in the military council on 3 occasions, and Babangida was warned. He refused to take a decision until it was almost too late. US Ambassador Lannon Walker and the British consul visited IBB and warned him about Abiola, but Babangida differed, which made the impact worse as the polling had begun. When he finally decided to intervene and stop the election, he precipitated the crisis of June 12. His friends in the military supported him but felt let down by IBB's lack of decisiveness. While there was consternation in Nigeria about the ouster of Abiola, the major international partners of Nigeria were not upset or concerned because they knew what the reasons were for the development. So was the 1993 election annulled because of MK Abiola's alleged drug ties? Well, let's hope not. Not only does he have very real and proven ties to the drug trade, in addition to explicitly positioning himself as the assumed successor to MKO as the political leader of Nigeria's Yoruba ethnic group. But he has also picked a fellow Muslim as a running mate ahead of next year's election. The only other electoral frontrunner in Nigeria's history to do that was, no prizes for guessing, that guy. Still, if anyone can manage to avoid having this particular bolt of lightning strike twice, it could well be Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the luckiest politician in Africa. I mean, when he needed money to launch a political career in the 90s, he apparently had $1.8 million saved up from bonuses and salary payments as a junior accountant at Deloitte, which obviously was very handy. When his chosen successor as Lagos State Governor faced a near certain electoral defeat in 2007, the more popular frontrunner coincidentally turned up dead inside his bedroom in Dolphin Estate, Ikoyi, one of the safest neighborhoods in Nigeria. He had been strangled to death. Naturally, the chosen successor then won the election, which was a happy coincidence. When he backed a candidate against the incumbent president in 2015, his good friend Gilbert Chaguri, the former kleptomaniac dictator's bagman, happened to have an excellent relationship with US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And she just happened to ignore recommendations from the State Department and US intelligence services to proscribe Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization, which effectively allowed it to gain critical mass and make the then government of the day even more popular. Naturally, his candidate duly won the election. Very lucky guy. When a former business partner, Dapo Akpara, took him to court over financial impropriety and money laundering at Alpha Beta Consultants, which is basically his little straw into the Lagos State government's treasury, the court became the first court in the history of Lagos State to burn to ashes and have all its files destroyed. The case was never refiled and it's currently being settled out of court, which is, of course, absolutely coincidental and very regrettable. The 1990s were a crazy time, and the 2020s are even crazier.
Thank you, David. God bless you, David Hundeyin. Like I said, go on there and read more. Where is it stated? I don't know this one because I tried to check that out, but I didn't see as well that it is ideal. It is godly to defend a Boko Haram sympathizer, a Boko Haram sponsor. The people who have murdered innocent people are queuing, right? To what? To be rewarded even more. Now, this is not even about whether you do it or not. I don't really care anymore, right? What happened is the consequences of this, even to you, as shrewd as your, let me say, as dark as some of your acts are, Nigerians. There will be some tiny light place. There should be, except if the whole place is so dark completely. No empathy, no nothing, no. Bloodthirsty criminals, bold-faced crooks who have managed to evade justice for so long because it's Nigeria. Nigeria is a place where criminals are rewarded. You know it. If anybody commits a crime, the right thing, right, is what? Is to get justice. Abi? Not reward them with something more. Abi? But in Nigeria, look at all of them. Look at all the characters. So ask yourselves, because me, I've been reading, I read about this, I read the Quran, I read the Bible, I read the summary, I read the questions, borders on all of this, and nowhere, no single place you were allowed as a religious person to defend any of these crooks, except, of course, you are mostly the same. You are the reflection of your leaders. Yes, you are. To you, enemies want to, which enemy is coming for who? Are you that blind to look around you and see who the enemy, the real enemy is, or the real enemies are? Your real enemies are the criminals in Babariga. Your real enemies are the criminals in suits, in different kind of a porch exposure that you see out there, running the shittiest and the shittiest of the shittiest system in a country of over 200 million people. Those are your enemies. Now, morally, you should never, ever say you have a God or you have faith and you dedicate your time to defend these rogues. Ino lo nlo. That's what I read. It said that those of you who claim to be, lawyers will see, lawyers will say, I'm doing my job. If lawyers who train to defend people, knows that there are limitations to what he could do if he wants to claim to be religious, or I don't want to be religious. Fine. Then you can do what you like. Sure, you get. Lawyers are told you cannot defend drug dealers. You can't even speak for them. It's haram. All of you. You see, religion says if you do good, you will go to heaven. Because everybody points here, because meanwhile, now here we go. If we do good or bad and we die, now this 6 feet they go put us. But people love to say, no, it's not there. Up. Baba God. If you do bad, you also go to what? Where? Is that one under or up? Anyway, religion says if you do good, and both religions says that. And it says you should not support evil. You should not see evil and turn and defend it. If you do that, you are evil. Okay? There's no excuse. You are going to hellfire. You see, majority of you, you are candidate of hellfire. But you don't know it because you are not really religious in a hypocrisy. Your religion in Nigeria is to threaten yourselves. If you don't watch your mouth, you will see that God will strike down your mouth now. Say, why? Why should God strike my mouth? Because I'm talking. Yes, watch your hypocrisy. You don't really believe in any God. You don't believe in anything. Are you with me? You just, your religion in Nigeria is mostly to threaten people, threaten you so that they can do your bidding. Watch your mouth too. Be very, very careful. Don't let me place a curse on your generation. Baba curse on whose generation? Eh? The cost that the poverty cost that is on millions of Nigeria today. Now, who placed the cost on them other than the politicians who have been the generational looters, the generational alaji, the generational deacon, the generational alajas, the generation this and that, who have used religion to dip you in poverty. So, don't let me, if I open Baba Koshidano, Psalm what? Psalm what and what? Because oniro, you are mostly liars. Your religion, your this, your that, is to threaten people who are ignorant. You better don't let me call the Rawania for you. If I go to this, I will not see summer. I will not see sky for 7. Stop lying to yourselves. Now, hypocrisy. You don't believe in any goddamn religion. It is all hypocrisy. Because if you believe in your religion, you watching me right now, you, Olori Big Bailey B, Lagos Abobaku, you are abusing me. You are calling me name. You are doing that. Why are you abusing me? You are abusing me because of another thief. It's so unfortunate that the hellfire they've told you that you have read in your Quran and you have read in the Bible, you have read in many other religious journal. Now Nigeria be the headquarters. Some of you have known. Some of you don't want to admit. Some of you don't know. The hellfire, the devil that they said you should go and stone in Mecca. The devil that they said you should go and give up a court in Jerusalem. The one they said that you should roll like the stone in front of the grave of Jesus rolled. Oh yeah, roll away from your enemy. The wearies that are sending you there to go and roll. They are rolling your life upside down in Nigeria every year. I don't think there is any country in this world that prays as much as Nigerians. Then you should have asked yourself, how come your prayers are not answered? The prayer of terrible human beings, because you know they are terrible human beings. You know them. You prefer them to one another. I like Tinubu. It's because Tinubu made a lot of people to become somebody. Ashiri. Yet you cannot, yet you cannot afford a drinkable water provided by these people who made people. Our leaders are see, if I have a way of saying it directly and then talking it into your brain, that's what I would do. Hypocrisy doesn't take anybody anywhere. Now lie. You love your oppressors differently. And they are the real devils. They are the devils. They are the devils that says you will not get light. No be devil, no be sin, no. No be because say you don't like your neighbor. No be because say you know they greet Mama Nkechi. And it's a sin. No. The devils they told you to go to vigil for, holding your destiny, holding the destiny of your children. Making anybody that is holding the destiny of my children, Jesus, Lord, oh yeah, kill them. But you pray Jesus kill the people where they hold the destiny of your children. The following day, you are there with the Ankara, and then you are singing and dancing for the same oppressors. So that's the confusion. Are you with me? You can deliver your message without abusing people. Advice. Oh, title. Didn't you read the title of this broadcast? It is Sunday sermon. It is the moment I actually have to speak directly to the mofos who have continually to contribute to whatever we are witnessing or experiencing in Nigeria today. And when you say, well, let's do it differently, they'll say, no. Do it. They will soon arrest you because they hate freedom. They love their oppression. In fact, they are waiting for their turn. Majority of them are waiting for their turn. Because Nigeria is what? Turn by turn, Nigeria Limited. You love your oppressors. Therefore, you find reasons to give excuses for them. And when you give excuses for them, they come back, right, to destroy you. It is not your sin. I have been saying it 1 million times. Chengbo, I have been saying it for 1 million times. No be your village people, they do you. No be your what you call her? Your mama's junior wife, they do you. No. If you go out and you see a newspaper, before you open, and by the time you open from the front page to the back page, you will see more than 50 of your enemies talking about how they are making your lives better when you know they are not. Because primarily, you ní jẹkújẹ afọ́fúngbẹ́mu alápámáṣiṣẹ́ ti fún Lawrence. Oníbàáràs, pickpockets, all risers, crumb eaters, crumb chasers. You have defended drug dealers. You have defended certificate forgers. You have defended money launderers. You have defended kidnapping sponsors. You have defended terrorist sponsor. You have defended all kinds of criminals. And you now want, you've given them power. Only to turn around and start giving excuses for them. Because you know what? Majority of those who will become the victims of this you are doing, all this you are doing, your one Nigeria and the rest, yeah? The victims, most of them are not one kureo. A bit person where then kidnap, beat them, ask the family to pay. The family is not paying. Last, then stab them for chest, open the chest, come out in organ, show kure. Would you say such person kure? Or the people that were attacked along Lagos-Ibadan Expressway 5 or 6 days ago, right? They opened fire on them, shot some of them. About 3 people died. That is the consequences of you defending drug dealers, defending genocidists, defending murderers, defending pickpockets, defending looters, defending career criminals as your leaders, because you don't really have any religion. Sorry, Oshisi, the members of the Temple of Truth, you know that when I use languages like this, I am talking directly to the wearies, the Mashamfanis, the suffering and smiling sufferheads, right? Those who are so happy in their chains and in their way of defending what is now befalling every one of us. Now, they are now calling God. That God will do this, God will do that for their evil men who has done so much evil. So when I speak like that, I am actually directing it to them. So when I say kure, just add it and say kure. But the point here is this. I am not a religious person. I admit I don't have any religion, right? But I respect all religion. I do. Because I think that actually gave me an idea, a sort of an insight into the hypocrisy of religion. And if you are looking for the religion hypocrites, Nigerians will take the first lead, and they don't even have a shame about it. Unfortunately, they always, right, fight for God. But when it is their turn, they wait for God to help them fight their crooked, the criminal leaders. Do you see that? Like, it doesn't matter how you pretend, using your own religious doctrine, share you deal with me. I read it, and I believe you should. This one is unforgivable sin. I saw it. I said, it's unforgivable. It's unforgivable that you know that Hopeless Uzodijo is a murderer. Hopeless Uzodijo is a kidnapper. You know it that Sheyi Makinde in Oyo is a kidnapper. You know it that Sonwoiku in Lagos is a murderer. Tinubu is a murderer, right? These guys are killers. You know Boko Haram is a genocidist. But you will defend them, won't you? You know Atifku is also a jihadist, a terrorist sympathizer, and a Fulani terrorist